I'm Alex Carcombs, and I have the great privilege of serving as chair of the City Club Missoula Board of Directors in 2025. Thank you all for being here today. City Club's mission is to bring together people to inform and inspire citizens on issues vital to the Missoula area community through public forums that encourage the discussion of new ideas and the free exchange of thought. We have a deep commitment to civility and civil discourse, even when discussing challenging topics. Some sincere thank yous first. Let me thank Missoula Community Access Television for recording our forums as part of their media assistance grants to nonprofit organizations. MCAT serves our community on cable channels 189 and 190, and you can view all past forums on MCAT's YouTube channel. A special thank you to our executive level sponsors, Blackfoot Communications and First Security Bank. Our executive level sponsors are key partners in helping expand audience access and public awareness of upcoming forums. We're grateful to all of our sponsors at all sponsorship levels for their generosity and advocacy for our mission. We invite you to join as a sponsor or as a member by visiting cityclubmissoula.com. Thank you to our board of directors and especially our administrator, Yenny Rohrbach, who keeps things running smoothly behind the scenes. City Club would also like to acknowledge that we are in the Aboriginal territories of the Salish and Kalispel people, some of whom may be present with us today at this forum. Today we honor the path they have shown us in caring for this place for generations to come. And then finally, 2025 marks the 20th anniversary of City Club Missoula. Thank you for all of those who have participated in our forums, provided sponsorships, and volunteered their time as board members over the years. We owe our current success to you. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce our moderator, Rob Cheney, who will then introduce the candidates. Rob Cheney grew up in western Montana and has spent most of his journalism career writing about the Rocky Mountain West, its people, and their environment. His reporting has also taken him from Jamaica and Brazil to Japan and Nepal. He studied political science at McAllister College and won numerous awards for his writing and photography, including fellowships at the Newman Foundation for Journalism at Harvard University and the National Evolutionary Science Center at Duke University. In Montana, Cheney wrote for the Hungry Horse News, Bozeman Daily Chronicle, the Missoulian, and the Montana Free Press, including stints as photographer, managing editor, and book author. He wrote The Grizzly in the Driveway. He currently lives in Missoula. Rob, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you all for coming. One, two, here we are. Thank you all for coming, because as we all know, the wisdom of crowds is the best way to work our way through politics. I would like to introduce our two candidates here. And just in the order that it was presented to me, Missoula voters elected Andrea Davis as mayor in November 2023. Since taking office, she has prioritized housing affordability, economic vitality, and public safety. With strong voter support, she strengthened Missoula Fire Protection Services through a successful levy. Her administration has invested in more than 100 affordable homes and advanced infrastructure and zoning reforms. Mayor Davis applies a cost of living lens to her budgeting and advocacy decisions and looks forward to continuing more of that work during the next 4 years. Sean Knope was born in Polson, Montana and raised in Missoula, where he graduated from Hellgate High School. After exploring professional opportunities elsewhere for several years, he was fortunate to return in 2000 to raise his children in his cherished hometown. For nearly 2 decades, Sean has played a pivotal role in the evolution of Missoula, both in tangible and intangible ways. As a project manager at Montana Glass for 19 years, he has skillfully overseen complex projects, managed budgets, and collaborated intimately with local businesses and residents to strengthen our community. Beyond his professional pursuits, Sean's dedication to service has been steadfast. For 2 decades, he has devoted his time to coaching Little League Baseball and serving on the Little League Board of Directors, mentoring countless young athletes and their aspirations. His active engagement with the Boy Scouts and Kiwanis further underscores his lifelong commitment to youth development, teamwork, and civic involvement. Sean's priorities are unequivocal: a judicious city budget, accessible housing, public safety, support for small enterprises, and the promotion of sustainability with an objective of achieving zero waste. He champions practical, transparent leadership that prioritizes the needs of Missoula's residents, ensuring our city remains an extraordinary place to live, work, and raise a family for generations to come. Now, what we are going to do here is hear from both these candidates for a few minutes each, and then I am going to ask each of them a question to which each other will get to have a short rebuttal. And then we are going to go to the table talk where you all come up with questions. I'm sure we'll have a little bit more rules and explanation for how to go about that. But I would plead with all of you to think now about what you want to know from these folks, and think of it in the form of a question that has an answer. Because the more questions we can get from these folks, the more answers we will get, and the more we'll all know. So with that, Mayor Davis, you have the floor.
Thank you, Rob. And thank you, everybody, for being here. It's wonderful to see you. And thank you, Sean, for participating in this conversation. I'm looking forward to it. It is extraordinary to be here as your elected mayor, just elected in November of 2023. It has been a robust and really good 2 years together. I think we have done a lot together to continue to strengthen our community, and it shows in ways because not only here in Missoula do we see a lot of our businesses thriving and being recognized around the country, and we continue to recognize that folks that are living here, some of which are having a hard time making it work. I have been committed my entire career, even before becoming mayor, to addressing working class folks being able to live and prosper in Missoula. And I did that because largely that's how I grew up. When I grew up in Kalispell, Montana, I grew up to two working class parents, and we, while they had moderate wages, we always had decent places to live. And so as a result of that, I was able to bike to school, and we grew gardens, and I knew my neighbors, and I had a really great public education upbringing, and I am the product of that. And I want that for your kids and grandkids and friends and neighbors. And so since becoming mayor, I really feel like we have done an incredible amount together, and we have so much more to do. And so that's why I'm running for a full 4-year term, because I feel like we have an incredible amount of momentum on things that are very important to you, because that's what I've heard from you, is that we want more affordable homes, we want more housing choice in our community. We've heard that not only from people that are starting out in our community, but folks that are also retiring. We know that we have businesses here whose employees find it difficult to be able to find a place to live in order to go to work. And we know that we have businesses here who cannot expand or relocate here as a result of the housing pressures that we have in Missoula and western Montana. In fact, really an issue in the entire West. Coupled with that, I'm focused on building a better Missoula, not only through housing choice and affordability, but also through paying attention to smart investment for infrastructure. In the last 2 years, we've been focused on making infrastructure choices that make our streets safer. We did that recently just by putting a new roundabout at the intersection of Phillips and Scott Street. That is a long-needed safety improvement for that neighborhood and for the kids and the parents that access not only Lowell School, but the West Side Park, which is a very vibrant and highly popular park. We were seeing accidents happen in that area. In fact, we saw 3 kids get hit in that area. I'm very proud of the fact that our Public Works Department looked at what can we do to make the most significant impact as quickly as possible. And while it was an inconvenience for a short time, being able to close the bridge, get that project done in 6 weeks meant that we got that project done on time and under budget. And that's what I mean by a cost of living lens, is how are we making the most impactful infrastructure and housing choices, just choices across the board happen so we can see and feel these improvements for our residents and visitors alike. Some other things that looks like is you see that there is some construction on Orange Street Bridge. We are installing a traffic light at the intersection of Craig and Orange Street. And that is something also, thank you, we're very excited about that. It's a long time coming. We've been focused on these things that need to happen in our community in order to address not only congestion, but safety at the same time. And so making these decisions as we continue to grow. because we know Missoula will continue to grow. We have a place that is a wonderful place to be. If you look out on the horizon, you look out across this room, you know that people want to be here. We live in an amazing place, a beautiful place, and a place with rich culture, a place with engaged citizenry. And this is the kind of community that people want to be in. So whether you're here now or whether you're looking at this community because this is somewhere that you might want to land by choice, how do we basically make room for the growing needs of our community? And so being focused on a land use plan that we got adopted in 2024, and now undertaking a unified development code, so we have a zoning framework that can not only meet the needs of today, but our future growth way into the future. A more predictable, easy to use, and consistent zoning code will make it easier to build more home types in all parts of our community, and not only just addressing housing, but also addressing that neighborhood commercial that we hear over and over from folks, that they want to be able to walk and get to neighborhood commercial more easily. The other thing I'm focused on is our cost of living and how we can apply that to a vibrant economy here in Missoula. When we talk about cost of living, we talk about every action we take at the city. How is that impacting our residents, our taxpayers, and that includes homeowners, renters, and businesses alike. So having applied that across the city, we've made decisions where we are being judicious with our spending. We are applying fiscal discipline across all of our departments, and that resulted in a 3.39% budget increase for the city of Missoula in new property tax values this year. That's across all of our parks, our road district, and our general fund. We had to get smart about how are we doing things where we need to expand services, because we know we've got services that people need and want in our community. An example of that is we need more street maintenance crews. Streets crumble, they need to be maintained, and we have had a long need for adding more staff in order to do that work, pick up leaves, handle our snow loads, patch potholes, do the work that we need to get around to school and to work. Instead of asking you to fund that through your property taxes this year, our Public Works Department took that charge of the cost of living and getting creative, thinking about how they could innovatively add to the services that you're asking for. And we're using the state gas tax as a way to bring on 2 new street maintenance employees, not property taxes. And so finding creative ways to get innovative is something that we will continue to stay focused on. And lastly, I'm dedicated to good governance. There is a lot of uncertainty in the world, and I don't need to tell you that. One thing about local government is that we are the closest government to you. And we owe it to you, to all of us, to be the most responsive government for better public service. And so what that might look like is using data to make better decisions, evaluating our communication tools to meet you where you're at in this day and age, and continuing to think about how we will make impact in areas that are important for our community that have made Missoula so amazing all these years. Some of those ways are leaning into arts and culture, and how is it that we can plan for not only holding up these elements of our community that make Missoula so unique and incredible, but how are we planning for the future to make sure not only the creators for arts and culture can be here, but how is it that you can continue to enjoy, not only live and work here, but enjoy and recreate and do the things that make Missoula so amazing. The other area that we're leaning into is, while there is incredible headwinds at the federal government right now, when it comes to support for things like climate-related activities, addressing climate change, we are still moving forward with these initiatives. And that looks like reducing our fossil fuel use, continuing to work with Northwest Energy on things like the Green Power Plan. City Council just passed our electric vehicle plan, so we can plan for these type of infrastructure needs into the future. And we will continue to work on our zero waste plan by reducing our landfill flow into the landfill in ways that we can best use not only our existing resources, but protecting our air, our water, and our quality of life here in Missoula. And so with that, I think I'm near the end of my 10 minutes. I really look forward to people's questions, and thank you again for being here today.
time I was in this room, one of the questions I was asked is, what is your weakest point? And my answer was public speaking, so bear with me. The second question was, what do you do to correct that or improve on that? And I said, to run for mayor. Forces you out of your comfort zone. This is technically a debate, but I'm going to go out on a limb here and agree with almost everything Andrea said. However, the property taxes in this town are going up so fast, so often, that in the last 5 years, we've gone up 50%. We have elders, I had one in my shop yesterday that came in, and she is hanging on by a thread because her Social Security doesn't quite cover her property taxes for the year. And she's probably going to be forced to sell out of her house. The problem is, with the prices of what houses are these days, where does she go? So we've got a strong problem to fill there. We've got to find a way to fund things without raising taxes, so we're going to have to get creative. I heard recently, and I had to look it up because I didn't know what it was, that we have a $3.1 million structural deficit. Basically, we don't have enough money to pay all of our budget. So Missoula City Charter says we have to have a balanced budget every year. So I'd like to figure out a way to cover that. Until we can have a budget to where we don't have to raise taxes and put people out of their homes, choices are going to get hard. Trying to figure out what we're going to fund. You know, we have to have fire, we have to have police, we have to have roads. Those are going to be the top three priorities on any budget that I'm a part of. Anything else after that is, going to be on a need to have basis. I think with the urban renewal department taking 50% of my tax bill every year, I think we need to cut that back so that we don't have to raise taxes as much. That's supposed to go towards blight and infrastructure. Yet I have a customer that lives behind our shop that had a city tree on city right-of-way break a city sidewalk. The city came in, cut the sidewalk out, ground the tree stumps down, poured a new sidewalk, and the homeowner got a bill for $14,000. So I think that is more of what urban renewal money should be spent on. We're getting ready to spend millions of dollars downtown on the master plan. I think changing a brand new bridge and changing streets should take a back seat to taking care of the ones we have that need more help. After that, I'm going to stop talking and give you more time to figure out questions so we can answer more questions for you.
All right. Just flip the order here, and Sean, start with you, if that's okay. You, in some of your earlier public comments, talked about what you plan to do starting as mayor, is going through the whole city government and looking to see what departments need to be there and if they should continue. You listed your priorities of fire, police, and roads, and everything else needs to be on a need-to-provide basis. That's a pretty tall order of restructuring government. Can you be a little more specific about how you would go about judging which agencies or which personnel are going to come or go?
Well, in that comment that you're talking about, it's not about getting rid of anybody. It's about moving them to departments that could need more help and departments that maybe don't need as much help. The time to get a permit to build in this town is exceeding 9 months. Time is money. You know, if we can't get permits passed and get buildings built, it just raises the price of everything. So, you know, maybe you take a staff from another office and you put them in that office to help out. So it'll be more of a restructuring, not eliminating jobs. So. Well, that would be up to you guys. You know, what is most important to you after the essentials are done. Like I said, there's things that we have to pay for, and the city charter says we have to pay for. After that, you know, we need to prioritize.
The rebuttal that I would make there, I suppose if we're going to rebut, and I have 2.5 minutes to address this, is that I would encourage you and everybody in this room to take a look at the program inventories that we put in place last year when I became mayor, and I asked our city departments to take a look at every single program in every single department and actually inventory it, make it available to the public so we can identify what is that program doing, how is it funded, is it essential by law, and what kind of vulnerabilities or sustainable elements to that program do we have in place. And that's the basic place of starting our priority-based budgeting process.
So, as I've been trying to follow the news, one of the things that constantly comes up is the mayor is blamed for everything. The flip side of that is the impression that the mayor is involved in everything, including a lot of things that some people think should be in the private sector. How do you define where the boundaries of your office are and where things that are very much in the economic community and outside the political world? Where is that line for you, and where are things that you should not be weighing to?
Thank you very much for that question. That's an excellent question. We just fielded a call to our office last week from a journalist in Georgia wanting to know how I was managing the salmon chalice wilderness. So that's a great example. And it happens a lot. So I think that's an excellent question because as in your role as mayor, you have formal roles and power. You have informal roles and power. You can make direct decisions in areas that are in our sphere of decision making and influence. And then there are places where it really is that. How do I utilize relationships and influence to nudge something in the way that we might want to see it, that you might be telling me we want to see that? A good example is what we're doing to address what Sean mentioned earlier, which is around the permitting processing taking too long in order to receive a building permit. Not only have we gone through a 3-year process to update a very forward-looking land use plan, and then now updating a very robust set of building codes to have a unified development code, we're also doing a process audit so we can manage the time frame to apply those codes so we can get permits out quicker. And that is something that we have direct control over. However, we don't do that alone. We've been doing this with enormous public input the entire time. We've had hundreds of communications and engagement opportunities with the public, much of which has happened in this room, but many of which has happened in other places. We're currently doing that right now. We hosted an event at the fairgrounds. And there's a survey open where you can give feedback on the development of the zoning framework and the Unified Development Code. We'll take that feedback, we'll machinate it again, and we'll bring it back to you to hear from you as the public as well as City Council, who will make a decision on these codes this coming winter. There are places where there are clear areas of our decision-making space, and then there are many that are not. And I would say that so many of the things that we're grappling with as a community are really not in our decision-making space, but we have to show up and be present, because ultimately that's what leadership is hearing from you, showing and talking about what we can do, and then working together to try to find those solutions. That we're working on some of the most challenging issues of our time. And so how I decide that is, I think often about, do I actually have decision-making role here? Is it in the charter? Is it within state law? And if it's not, then I think about how it is that we as a city can partner with the private sector.
Again, I'm going to go out on a limb here and agree with everything she said here. It's amazing when you go door to door what people think that you can control as mayor. I get some wild stuff, so it's not in our control a lot of this stuff that they want. But we have to listen to them and maybe explain to them why that's not in our area of expertise or in the area of the mayor's job. But yeah, it's working together, talking together, making decisions together, and explaining why we can't do some things.
Okay, everybody, we're going to take about 10 minutes to go to our table talk portion of the program. We'll have the rules up on the screen soon, but take about 10 minutes, talk amongst everybody else at your table, formulate a question, appoint somebody to ask that question to one or both candidates, and we'll come back in about 10 minutes, and we'll have a couple of board members going around with microphones to collect your questions and make sure, as Rob instructed earlier, come up with a question that has an answer. I'm going to steal that going forward. We'll see you in about see you at 12:05. With that, if anybody's ready to ask some questions, please raise your hand. Board member will come around. They will hold the mic for you and get ready to your question. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Abby, and my question is for Andrea. Andrea, I was interested in your talk about strategic planning moving forward for Missoula and the projects that you guys have. There's been several projects in the past that Missoula's county and city have purchased, like the Sleepy Inn Hotel, Marshall Mountain, several projects that were purchased with taxpayer dollars, but really have become a blight, and they're not being developed. So as you're moving forward in your strategic planning, how are you going to strategically plan on developing those areas and also kind of be held to account by taxpayers?
Abby, thank you for that great question. I've got 2.5 minutes, right? Excellent. So this has been a high priority of mine because in using those examples, I'll just say that the Marshall Mountain was purchased by the city and the county using open space bond funds. So that is very different than the purchase of Sleepy Inn. For example, Sleepy Inn was purchased during the pandemic when there was a necessary public health mandate to reduce the number of people that were in congregate shelter. So the city was very smart in utilizing federal dollars that were available through COVID to and work with the redevelopment agency to acquire that property and then use those federal dollars to operate it. Now, since it's been in our possession, there was a community-led planning process that developed into what's called the West Broadway Vision. It's an extension of the downtown master plan. When I came into office, I took a look at all of the 45 acres that are currently in the city's possession. So that does not include Marshall Mountain because technically the county owns it. What I mean by those 45 acres is it is 45 acres that is in the city's possession for the purpose of redevelopment, not for future municipal needs. Sleepy Inn is one of them. And it's like, why aren't these lands being developed? And it's for a host of different reasons. But the quick and the short of it is that as a community, as a municipality, and as a group of people, we get really zealous about what we want to see. We want to see all these things on this one particular piece of property. And we end up putting so many parameters on one piece of property that it becomes infeasible to make it happen. I can tell you that over 2 decades of working in the nonprofit community development and affordable housing space, we did it there too. You know, we would get together with neighborhoods or as that nonprofit, we would work with folks and we would overly plan for things that ultimately ended up being infeasible. So I just brought together a city lands task force. There were members of different experts from different fields: finance, banking, construction, development, for-profit and nonprofit, to come up with a strategic plan, to help me develop a strategic plan to how to utilize these city lands in a mosaic. Thinking about it like a mosaic. We are not going to be able to accomplish every single thing on every single piece of property. The old library block is a really good example. How, as we are trying to achieve different city goals, do we think about these lands like a mosaic, so where one goal might be achieved over here, we now might be able to leverage what we did on that piece of property to achieve better goals over here. Midtown Commons is a really good example, and I'll think about using that in another question here, because I know I'm at the end of my time. But that's an excellent question in my City Lands Task Force. Address just that very thing, and all that information is available on the mayor's page on the city website. I think there's a 30-second rebuttal.
I'll do a real quick thing on just the Sleepy Inn. Andrea said that that was a strategic, good use of money. We spent, that piece of property was for sale for 3 years for $675,000. COVID hit, we paid $1.1 million for that piece of property. We then in turn put almost $500,000 into it to make it livable, and then we spent another $300,000 to tear it down. I called a few weeks ago, 2 months ago, called the realtor to see what it was for sale for, and it was at $675,000. So I don't think that's a great use of our income.
Hi, Margaret. Thank you for being here today. Our question comes from a concern about downtown parking and traffic flow. In the past, West Broadway, the diet there, I didn't live here at the time, but I heard it didn't go well, but maybe it went great, and I don't know. But the question is, why will the downtown road diet that the city is looking at, why will that work well for us as a city?
Would you like me to start with that? Okay, great. Margaret, thank you for your question. I think most specifically you might be referring to the Downtown Safety, Accessibility, and Mobility Project. That is a large project underway. We just had an open house here at the library. 150 people came, so if you came, thank you very much. If you didn't have a chance to come, tons of information and asking for your opinion on Engage Missoula. I hope you take a look at that. The way that we will address traffic congestion and the needs of downtown is that these are basically three planning processes built into one with this activity. There's been about $500 million of private investment that has been made downtown, but the public infrastructure investment has not kept up with that, and that's why this is a unique opportunity. The first thing we're doing is we're converting the 2 one-ways to 2-way streets. 2-way streets offer much better flow, both for safety and access to businesses, than do 1-way streets. Will there be interruption? There will. And we'll be working with the businesses and the public to address that interruption during construction. But ultimately, 2-way flow helps. The other thing that this project funds and enables us to do is traffic signal coordination. 23 downtown traffic signals will be better coordinated to reduce congestion. That traffic light technology, anything like this that you get involved with, it's really fascinating with the city. We can go down that rabbit hole for a while. But it turns out that certain stoplights are Department of Transportation, some are city, some they control, some we control, and ultimately we need to find better ways that we can help control the traffic flow and congestion by better flow through signalization. We will see that with the downtown master plan. We'll be able to have a concentrated area where we can actually test that and then apply that to the rest of the city as we're able to put funding and other plans in place for that. The other thing that the downtown SAM will offer is full accessibility for folks that choose not to use a vehicle, but also addressing how vehicles get around more safely. We want vehicle traffic to be safer, not only for people driving vehicles and large trucks, but also people that are walking and using other modalities. And so one of the ways that we'll be able to improve traffic is by helping people through specific pedestrian-oriented areas Building an accessible ramp off of the Bear Tracks Bridge will be a way in which people that are using wheelchairs and others will actually be able to access the park more readily and easily.
Well, I don't need to spend much time on it, but my biggest concern with the downtown master plan is parking. We're going to shrink the streets down, we're going to shrink the parking. At the same time, we're going to have to rebuild one of the parking structures, and so downtown parking is going to be negatively impacted. And I worry about the business owners down there and their business traffic to their stuff. So I don't like the master plan. I think there's other priorities we should be looking at first.
Am I allowed a rebuttal? Okay. I just want to add a point of clarity that the downtown master plan is a separate document. The downtown SAM is elements of that master plan and others that are actuating different traffic and infrastructure improvements. The downtown parking garage that is getting repaired has nothing to do with the downtown SAM project. That is a parking garage that has some infrastructure issues and some safety issues that have to be addressed, so that's what's happening with the Missoula Parking Commission. That's separate, although it's not to say that it won't compound when there is construction. One of the things that we don't do is we actually, as a city, we haven't taken a look at our existing parking, where it's located, and how do we maximize what's currently available to us. That's another thing the downtown SAM will do, is they'll actually be able to maximize our existing parking options and be able to be much more clear, not only for businesses, but visitors alike.
Just that I'm glad I'm short so you can go longer.
Hi, Jordan. So we were curious at this theme of like what's in your decision space, like within your direct decision space and for your planned actions, what do you think you're going to do to address the housing affordability for working class, middle class families, individuals, and for those who, due to any number of challenges, are unable to work and afford housing?
Well, the real question or answer to that is that we need to build. Until we have enough housing for everybody, prices will never come down. We need to collaborate with builders, with spaces that we have, the 45 acres. We need to get it developed into some affordable housing. There's some programs that the tenant unions are talking about where we can do a bond where we could pay for housing separate from our taxes, and then the rents or payments that you would pay back on those things would pay for the housing, and so I'd like to see more of that.
Thank you for your question. This is an area of deep passion, commitment, and expertise that I bring to the mayor's office. So first of all, I appreciate you recognizing that the city doesn't have ultimate decision space and power over this, right? We live in a capitalist system in a state that has and holds up private property rights very significantly. The city of Missoula, I think, is leading the state in the work that we've been doing. I've been proud to be involved in that work leading up to this, and certainly as your mayor. What we've been doing since I have been mayor is that we have broken ground, and it was mentioned in the introduction, on over 100 deed-restricted affordable homes. So let me just start by saying, we're starting with the foundational work. We got a forward-looking land use plan adopted by City Council in 2024, December of 2024. We're now taking that vision, we're putting that vision into work by updating all of our development codes into a unified development code so the private sector can act more quickly to develop different home types in all parts of Missoula. Second of all, the city is applying direct tools. We're doing that through using the 45 acres and how we can strategically use these 45 acres to address a whole host of different housing types. Because we have heard over and over again that not only are folks that are living on fixed incomes, let's say Social Security disability income, need more accessible housing, but so do folks that are working in businesses downtown and all across Missoula. So we need to take a look at all sorts of different options working with the private sector. We do that through utilization of different tools we have at our disposal. We have a redevelopment agency that invests in economic development and infrastructure investment. We just landed a deal at the Riverfront Triangle after decades in the making, where we're working with the private sector to see a hotel get built there that meets the downtown master plan goals. We are investing in the infrastructure that will eventually build out the infrastructure of that blighted area downtown, and $7 million will go into our Affordable Housing Trust Fund as a result of that transaction. The city then can utilize the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to leverage other housing projects. I mentioned earlier, we're currently under construction with 89 homes for sale for our workforce, utilizing our workforce housing program through the redevelopment agency. And we just funded 24 more deed-restricted rental homes on Third in partnership with Opportunity Resources. Those are fully accessible, and they expand the accessibility and adaptability requirements, so folks that are living in larger chairs and such can actually utilize these apartments much more readily. So we're making direct investments as well as land use decisions.
Just that Andrea is amazing at what she does with the housing stuff. I will not say anything bad against her.
Thanks, Sean. Appreciate that. So nice.
My name is Paul Mwingwa, and I'm originally from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Last year, I've been in Missoula for 7 years, and last year I became a new American. My question to both of you is, Missoula has been a welcoming city in Montana for refugees and immigrants, and what is your plan or your strategy to keep Missoula a welcoming city and to help the voice of refugees be heard in Missoula? Thank you.
I'd like me to start? Okay, thank you. Paul, congratulations, and thank you for a great question. Our strategy and our plans have been to meet with you and others from the Refugee Congress and organizations like Soft Landing and others that are working with folks that have come through the refugee program, that have relocated to Missoula, and how can we better understand the barriers that you are experiencing to best engage with and flourish in Missoula. So first of all, I will say that we will continue to be a welcoming city because Missoula will continue to be a constitutional city. We will continue to uphold the law, and we will continue to make sure that people have that they have access to their constitutional rights. And second of all, that we have a team of people at the city that believe in that and are carrying that out as well. When we were meeting recently and you came to my office with a group of different folks from different countries that have come to Missoula through the refugee relocation program, we talked about ways that we can uphold not only a strong relationship but gain better understanding of different cultures, that we can identify ways that we, through the city of Missoula, can provide clarity around our laws, procedures to folks that may not have English as a first language. We talked recently about creating videos on things like, with our police department, what can you expect during a traffic stop? Because that kind of understanding doesn't exist in every country. And so how can we better relay what it is that folks should anticipate? Because ultimately, we don't want any surprises for folks. We want folks to not only feel welcome, but be part of a vibrant community. And so we're not only open for ideas, but we want to make sure that we are very publicly upholding our relationship with the refugees that have chosen to make Missoula their home, because ultimately it has become a much more vibrant community as a result. Thank you.
Once again, I'm going to be short because I can't argue with any of that. I've lived in Missoula since '67, so I saw the influx from after the Vietnam War, and it was very hard for those people back then, and the strides that Missoula has made to welcome these people and help them is been astronomical since then. I think we still have work to do. There's probably less than 2% of people in this room that are not American by their ancestors. So Montana and the United States as a whole is a melting pot, and we welcome everybody in here, and Missoula is a safe haven for everybody.
Jenna Staten, I'm asking for our table. We're wondering what the kind of shortfall in funding from our property taxes. Can you develop a stronger partnership with nonprofits and people with maybe extra cash in our community that might help make it up rather than just looking at our tax structure? I guess the idea of partnering with maybe where the money is, if you know, or if we can find out, because our tax structure doesn't support it. We're thinking particularly of things like food insecurity, which we know is a priority.
I think that's a great question. Missoula has to partner with nonprofits, private citizens, builders, business owners. The biggest problem that I see going forward, we were in a tenants unit meeting here a while back, and they were wanting the city to finance their right to counsel. And I said, well, that would be great if we could afford it, number one, but also relying on any kind of a government involvement, 100%, leaves you wide open for budget cuts later. So everything we do, we should be partnering with the private sector. The money that we spend over on the Poverello Center on the city side of this thing is getting crazy. And we need to get nonprofits inside of that. The cleanups on the streets in front of there, we're spending thousands of dollars every week, and it never gets any better. So partnering is going to give long-term security in the programs that we develop.
I'm going to answer that question in full, right? It's to both of us, right? Okay. Jenna, thank you for your question. Partnering with the private sector, both through philanthropy, businesses, and nonprofits, is not only critical, but it's been one of the ways that Missoula has been so successful to date. I want to use an example and then address your question around food insecurity. An example of something to be celebrated is just right down here locally, not only in the building we're standing in, but just down the way at Karis Park. The thing that the government can bring to the table is effective planning, because when opportunity comes at you, you can strike. So we have a partnership consortium for recreational users along the Clark Fork. For many of you that have been here for decades, you remember people didn't used to recreate on the Clark Fork because, well, there was a dam up above. We had a whole host of reasons why. But over the course of many years, it has become more and more popular. And ultimately, we need to manage for that in order to not only for the safety of the people, but the health of the river, and of course, its amazing cultural and economic development opportunity. We plan for river access points along the Clark Fork. And when the federal government made an Economic Development Authority grant available, the City Parks and Rec, along with partnership with the Downtown Missoula Partnership, went for that $1.2 million economic development grant. The city was awarded this grant. The terrace at Karis Park is built. And as a result, not only do we have that funded through a federal grant, Downtown Partnership Philanthropy, the businesses of downtown, and you, the taxpayers, through the Parks and Rec Department, we created not only an amazing place for people to come together, and but also accessibility along the river and river safety. When it comes to food security, that is a deep issue, because how is it that we can take that same kind of philosophy and apply that to things that are basic and essential needs? Some of the things that we can do is make sure that we provide locations for people to gather, to be able for nonprofits or the private sector to be able to come together to offer food for folks. can the city utilize its tax exempt status in some way to be able to work with the private sector or the nonprofit sector to be able to, I'm thinking out loud here as I speak, purchase large, commodities of food. Ultimately, we need to make sure that we're addressing all of the other cost of living issues. So when it comes to food, our nonprofit sector has the ability to continue to make impact for folks that need to access that kind of life-saving and essential element in their life. Sorry, thank you. I know I went long.
My name is Andrew Wolfram. I'm a CASA volunteer here in Missoula. Our table's question concerns the lack of childcare options in Missoula. I think a lot of people were disappointed with the removal of the childcare facility requirement from the Scott Street development. What are some other options that the city is exploring or should explore for increasing the availability of childcare in Missoula? And that's for both kids.
May I start? Okay, thank you for your question and also for volunteering with CASA. Awesome organization. I would love to take a moment to address the point you made about the Scott Street parcel, and it relates to the 45 acres and why I called together a group of professionals to come up with a strategy for how we approach utilizing our lands for reaching and obtaining city goals, community goals. One of the things that we need to do is be more clear about what we can achieve. And ultimately, when we started that project at the Scott Street Rivara site, it was before the pandemic. And if any of you are in the construction industry or the development industry, you might recognize, and I certainly did because of my career leading up to being in the mayor's position, costs of development have more than doubled for a host of different reasons. That same reality happened at the Scott Street Rivara project. So our choice was to either ask for more tax dollars to subsidize a childcare facility there, or recognize the limitation that we had. And the 45-acre city lands task force effort that I've made is to really be more clear about managing our public expectations. What can we achieve together? And if we decide that childcare is going to be at a site, then we need to plan for that specifically from the beginning so that we actually have the viability to make it happen. So then I'll say, what are we doing? Well, we're doing a number of things through our Parks and Rec department, and we partner with a number of folks. We've been able to do both pre and post-school childcare that has helped a lot of working parents be able to save on childcare expenses through participation in our different Parks and Rec programs. I just met with the CEO of the United Way last week as we talked about lifting up a task force, and the United Way will be spearheading this effort as a child care task force in this community because we have different elements. But how are we looking at this across the board? The city has an opportunity to participate here, but we need to make sure that we are not inadvertently making it more difficult for the private sector to provide child care. And so one of the ways that we are addressing that through our Unified Development Code and our zoning framework is how can we make sure that where the private sector can provide childcare and afford their rent to be there, how is it that we can make sure that our land use plan addresses that adequately? So there's a whole host of things that we can do, and it certainly continues to be a high priority, as does senior care, because as our population ages, we're going to need to also think about that as well.
So the loss of the child care facility at Romero was quite disappointing. I keep hearing that over and over. I thought that was in the initial planning stages all along. So to say that we need to start at the beginning thinking of that, I think we did, and we still lost that. I understand that it didn't pencil out for the owners, but we need to take the lands that we do have. We need to partnership with some of the daycares and some of the businesses and get something funded for these people, because everybody knows in Missoula, when I was a kid, my dad worked, my mom stayed at home, raised kids. That is not a possibility in this town anymore. So we have got to find some ways to fund it.
Can I have a rebuttal on that? I just want to make sure that, again, for a point of clarity, that it's understood that we had the idea that yes, we want childcare here, yes, we want affordable homeownership, but we didn't have a feasible plan established when we made that commitment to the public, and that is the difference. Because when we looked at how could we achieve childcare on this site at this point, 5 years after this original concept was considered, and again, after having gone through a pandemic where development costs are 50% or more than they were when this plan was originally conceived, we had to make a decision on whether we were going to ask for $1.5 million more in taxpayer-funded subsidy to make that affordable for the childcare provider. And even then, we didn't have somebody willing to do it. So I think you got to make hard decisions in this job, and you got to tell people why.
Hi, I'm Justina McDermott. I'm a water rights consultant with WGM Group. With all this planning and developing plans the city has, what would you say the city's reputation is as a client and partner with these private firms and other entities and people you do business with for the city, or as a city entity? Are there gaps in that relationship or the way you guys work with these firms that could be improved upon, or do you lead by example as a client in these development processes?
I guess that question's probably aimed towards me. And honestly, that's probably a question for you to answer, more so than I, but I will tell you that having heard feedback from the private sector and development consultants like WGM or other development consultants, it is one of the reasons that we have taken so much time to be thoughtful and intentional about frequent utilizers of our building code, to be providing input right now. They have been ever since our land use plan was adopted in December of 24, and we've been working on our set of development codes. We've invited frequent utilizers, which are people that use the code, because we need to hear from them, is this actually going to achieve what has been envisioned by the community, and as a consultant, is this a more workable plan? I will tell you that this is a massive undertaking, and we will learn from this after we get this approved, and then eventually make improvements going forward. I would say that based on the vast number of relationships that we have with various consultants, including WGM on the project that I just talked about, or the project that we're going to be working on the West Broadway corridor, with the work that we're doing there on the river flows, we have really good working relationships with our consultants, and we rely on the private sector for your expertise and the work that you provide in order to achieve these major community goals. But we're always open to getting feedback, and that's a very important element, which is why we did a community survey in 2024, and we want to hear from the public on how we can improve and be a more responsive government.
I'll just say, because of the answer, I'm going to guess that the answer, or because of the question, I'm going to guess the answer might be no. That there's room for improvement.
Hi, so my name is Fiona, and I know that we have already had one question about kind of affordability in the housing sector, and specifically with like home ownership and stuff like that. So our question is, setting aside home ownership and knowing that about 51% of Missoula rents currently, what kind of more short-term solutions do you guys have in mind to help with the rental crisis that's happening and the exorbitant cost of rent and how they're always going up every single year? What can we do to support the people who rent in this town short-term versus long-term?
Thank you.
I spent a short time in California, and they had a program there for renter's credit. I'd like to work with the state and see if that we could get something implemented along those lines. Again, it's a tough issue because nothing is going down in value, so I think we need help from the state to get that done.
Thank you for your question, Sean. I agree. We need help from the state to get this done, not only in the form of capital, but in the form of law and legislation that actually would enable us to do more. My experience before becoming mayor, I was doing affordable housing for 2 decades. One of those things was leading the Montana Housing Coalition. So myself and a number of other colleagues around the state worked on getting legislation passed in Montana. Montana had no specific money of its own that was going to building permanent affordable housing until we passed the 2017 Coal Trust Multifamily Homes Program. There's a long way to go there, and ideas like Sean just mentioned, where there's a renter's credit, we have done a number of things, and the city will continue to advocate at the state level. Because I mentioned that we have investment in direct rental housing. The opportunity for our new land use plan and development code to offer smaller homes to be built in more places in the community can lead to more affordable rents. And as we balance the rental needs with long-term rental with short-term rental, the city of Missoula is regulating short-term rentals so we can track and see if those short-term rentals are having a significant impact on our housing stock. That rental income from, the revenue generated from the management of our short-term rentals was actually one of the revenue sources this year. For the first time, we've brought in $250,000 of revenue into the city's general fund to help pay for services due to short-term rental registrations. But we do need to keep focusing on this. One of the things that we have always had an imbalance between renters and homeowners compared to the state and compared to the nation in Missoula. It's true for basically any college town. And one of those reasons is that when people pay so much for rent, they actually have a very difficult time getting into homeownership. It's why making investments like the workforce housing program on Scott Street, where we have shared equity type of homeownership opportunities, is a good model. It's a good alternative to renting and on the pathway to different housing opportunities. But the city will continue to make investments through our Affordable Housing Trust Fund and through our workforce housing program directly in long-term deed-restricted affordable housing options. The problem is that will still leave a gap for folks that are not income qualified to live in certain housing and still need an affordable rent. But that's why having local tools is so critical.
I would only add that we need to get the state to get that money from somewhere else, because our coal is going to be a huge issue with coal plants are going to be shutting down in the near future because of the West Coast passing regulations on importing coal-fired electricity. So maybe we can get the state to adopt something for the legal marijuana to help fund that.
Hi, I'm Janice Reinhold, and we're wondering, recognizing that there is a housing issue in Missoula, if the Lower Rattlesnake is open for multifamily housing, what is your vision for the traffic pattern, particularly if there needs to be an evacuation from that upper section?
I'll start with that. Thank you. Our Missoula, the 2045 land use plan, identifies the Lower Rattlesnake's land use designation, and so I would recommend that you take a look at that. It was reduced from the original recommendation based on the Office of Emergency Management's input and dialogue at the City Council. City Council did decrease the amount of density in the Lower Rattlesnake as a result of that. So there are constant coordination and communications between our jurisdictions on emergency evacuation. The Lower Rattlesnake's adjacency to downtown and actual evacuation points is there's a number of different evacuation points out of the Lower Rattlesnake. So you asked about that specifically, so that's what I'll address. So any of these things, that's the point of having a very well thought out and informed land use plan, because that land use plan informs the codes, and that set of codes are things like not only how high you can build on a certain parcel or how much of the parcel that you can consume with the building, but it also addresses what's called street typologies. Street typologies will address then traffic flow and other ways in which we not only can get around every day for just daily life, but also when it comes to the point of an emergency. I've had a number of neighborhoods, Grant Creek, Butler Creek, Rattlesnake, ask for emergency planning sessions. While that information is available, the head of the county's emergency management has said over and over again that the challenge being there's not just one plan, there's not just one place to meet, because it depends on the emergency in the rattlesnake. Where might that fire be originating? And so if you tell people to take a certain road, but the fire is actually on the other side of the valley, then we actually could compound the issues. And so the emergency management plan in terms of how we direct traffic using our emergency services is certainly what we rely on. And I have to say, what an incredible group of people in terms of that skill and expertise. We saw it live happen two summers ago when we had that windstorm. And I'm very grateful for the expertise and the commitment we have from the City County Emergency Management Services.
Yeah, Andrea's got way more information on that than I do, but I do identify that there would be a, if we allowed too much density in the lower rattlesnake, there's very limited escape routes in there, so I would recognize that.
Hi, Linda Henderson. We keep hearing about growth, and that we have to build our way out of this housing crisis. Our question has to do with what is the plan to manage the water and the limits that we probably will eventually face on our aquifer.
Thank you for your question, Linda. So one of the ways that we can best manage our water consumption is by smart land use planning and growth, because ultimately the way in which that we can reduce water consumption is through efficient water use, accessing our municipal water services by being closer in and by potentially not watering very large lawns, I think is one of the things that we will continue to talk about here in Missoula around efficient water use. What does consume natural resources is sprawl, and it's been shown. It's a natural effect of utilizing large tracts of land for large yards and things of that nature. And they're wonderful. It's a nice space to be, but ultimately we have to be conscientious around what are we using our municipal and potable water for. Somebody asked me recently about data centers and whether the city and the county are leaning in to attract data centers here. And I've been doing some research in this area, and I can tell you we have no active plan to bring a data center here, although might that happen? Possibly. What do we need to plan for? But one of the things that seems highly detrimental to our water source, which we have one of the best water sources with our aquifer, is that we don't want to use potable water for cooling of these data centers like they are in places like Phoenix, Arizona. So we need to really be thinking about what kind of water is going to the needs of something like a high industrial user like a data center. When I toured the Public Works Missoula water facility and talked with the folks that are running the wells, doing this work every day, I asked that same question. How are we tracking the amount of water that is being consumed with new projects that are coming in, and then evaluating our overall usage? We track what comes back into the aquifer and what goes out. And so ultimately that information, that data is utilized in our planning efforts when we're making decisions around the kind of infrastructure that we need to support current and future development.
Where did that question come from? There you are. We definitely need to be very careful with our water usage. We're already seeing the effects of it out in the Linda Vista area and Lower Miller Creek. They're having to buy up land to get the water rights, so that ties up land that can't be developed too. So multiple issues going on there, and that's a finite source, so we're going to have to be careful with it.
Kate Koenig with the Mansfield Center. Mayor Davis, you referenced saving or repurposing funds from the gas tax to support two positions in street maintenance. What is now unfunded by having shifted those funds? As a follow-up to Sean, you also mentioned getting creative to repurpose city funds. Could you give a specific example of how you would do that?
Great, thank you for your specific question, Kate. That money was called BARSA, or the state gas tax, was generally always utilized for capital projects. So we are now looking at how we are funding those capital projects in other ways. We have a 5-year capital improvement plan, and the use of those 2 staff positions, we believe, are actually a better investment in the long term, because we are taking better care of the assets that we own today, rather than needing to save up that money for always large capital projects. Ultimately, the city of Missoula is incredibly resourceful and talented at obtaining large grants, and whether those are available or not is soon to be seen. But that is something that we continue to work with our partners at the county and other places to deploy these type of investments in large capital projects. Some of these projects that would not happen otherwise, the downtown sound project's a good example. The expansion or the improvements along Russell Street that you will see once that is underway. We received a multi-million-dollar grant from the federal government last year, and Russell Street improvements will be we'll be focusing on that, utilizing grant resources in our local match. So I respect that question a lot, because we have to make decisions. We're making trade-off decisions. When we're in a position like we are, we have to decide how we're utilizing our resources most effectively for the best bang for our buck. And ultimately, I think that decision will lead to that.
So, trade-offs. The Urban Renewal District, they do a great job. They fund some great projects. However, we have 6 urban renewal districts in Missoula. The smallest one is taking about 50% of the tax base off of each property owner. The one that I live in is just one of the smaller, well, it's a bigger area, but it's a smaller percentage. But it takes 50% of my tax money goes to that. It's taking money from schools, it's taking money from the state, the city. It affects the general fund. So I think it needs to be scaled back. The property where I work, we rent, but the owner of that, 75% of his tax base goes to the Urban Renewal District. They're originally set up to be 15 years long, and now they've been extended out for 40 years. So for 40 years, these 6 urban renewal districts are going to be siphoning off anywhere from 40 to 75% of the tax base, which directly affects the general fund.
Yeah, I'll just provide a brief response there to say that, just quickly, when an urban renewal district is created because of the recorded blight in the area, it is because no economic development or infrastructure investment is being made. So basically, when you draw a boundary around that, the tax base that was there always goes and continues to fund all elements of government, other governing jurisdictions, schools, so on and so forth. It's the tax base that increases as a result of that investment that stays within that district, so you continue to make those investments. So we're investing in Urban Renewal District 2 with a bunch of streetlights along the trail as a result of that work.
It's still affecting the bottom line. You're freezing the tax base and all the money that goes from property tax assessment raises and our tax increases is still being pulled off for that redevelopment. I just think that it could be used better.
Okay, my name is Lorraine Bond, and this is a question for Sean about social safety nets. And I just want to know what you think the city government's responsibility is towards our most vulnerable residents.
Good question. The most vulnerable is the reason that I decided to run for mayor. I see the elderly being taxed out of their homes and not having the safety nets of a child or a grandchild to help take care of them. People having to move in with their kids to be taken care of. So the city needs to support those people as well as everybody else that has any kind of special needs. so I feel strongly about helping. That's the main reason that I ran.
I'm going to provide a follow-up there. So this is a really good question reflecting back to what does the city have the direct ability to influence or impact, and where then can we be a partner? So we just talked about taxes and that impacting folks, and we have to decide then how are we going to fund, if we were going to provide a grant program that would help seniors stay in their home easier. It will be at the cost of other taxpayers, or it will be decreasing services in other places. Those will be some trade-offs we have to consider. It is one of the reasons that the city continues to advocate at the legislature for ways that we can impact seniors living in their homes, and that would be through property tax relief, for example.
All right, thanks everybody. Fortunately, we're at the end of our time. I guess we could have gone a bit longer, but many thanks to our candidates, Mayor Davis and Sean, and for moderator Rob Cheney. Thanks to all of you for your thoughtful and specific questions. Appreciate that. And many thanks also to the Missoula Public Library for allowing us to use this space, and for Slow Curve Catering for providing the great food. Join us next month where we're going to talk about tax increment financing, TIF. Lots of people have strong opinions on that, so I hope you'll join us.